It turns out that in order for rules to protect us, one needs to respect the rules. And if you discard and disregard them, it does not really matter what they say. If you undermine democratic institutions, the law becomes nothing more than a rubber stamp. Over recent months, both Trump and Netanyahu have been operating according to what Princeton professor Scheppele calls autocratic legalism, that destroys democracy with its cynical manipulation of the law. They do so by dismantling key institutions, appointing loyalists to key positions, attacking the media and the academia, and trafficking in populist narratives that portray their opponents as unpatriotic traitors and enemies of the people. Where do the courts stand in the face of such threats? In the U.S., the conservative majority of the Supreme Court has transformed it into a body all too eager to nullify the rights they are sworn to protect. The Israeli Supreme Court has become more conservative too. Our justices have a mandatory retirement age of 70. In recent years, 3 liberal judges have retired and were not replaced by other judges since the justice minister refuses to convene the Judicial Appointments Committee until he gets what he wants, which is complete control of the nomination process. But our court is still seen to some degree as the bulwark protecting human and civil rights. Given the American court's recent rulings, it is hard to say this about the Supreme Court of the United States. Where does that leave us? In order to talk about the similarities and differences of the two systems, about the threats and challenges and how the legal system addresses them, I am delighted to host today Dahlia Lithwick, a dear friend, a lawyer, an award-winning journalist and author, most recently of Lady Justice, Women, the Law and the Battle to Save America. She's also a senior editor at Slate, the host of the Amicus podcast, and most notably, an expert analyst on the Supreme Court of the United States. And what can you tell us about the court's evolution during this really long time? Was there a particular moment that you recognized, either in real time or in hindsight, as a watershed moment, maybe a few of those?
Look, the U.S. Supreme Court is in some ways the opposite of the Israeli Supreme Court. And one of the key ways, and I think you flicked at this in your introduction, Orly, is that it is the most mystified, reified institution in the United States government. So I briefly taught at Hebrew U Law School a few years ago, and when I was trying to explain to my students there that the justices are seen as like gods who walk among us, you know, like brains in vats, the smartest 9 jurists in the world, my students laughed because there's no such mystification or, you know, the idea that the justices of the Israeli Supreme Court are perfect in every single way. It's laughable. So I think one of the things, and I know we'll talk about this in a minute, one of the things that's hard in the United States is to get people to puncture that sense that the court is simply a quasi-religious, oracular institution. It's the opposite, nachon? And so it's so interesting to me because what I have witnessed in my career is these moments when that gets punctured, right? And so, for instance, in 2016, Justice Antonin Scalia, probably the court's signature conservative thinker, dies. Barack Obama names someone to replace him, and this is sounding very familiar to you. The Republicans simply refuse to give Merrick Garland a hearing. They refuse to confirm him. They make up some pretextual, oh, blah, 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 it's Obama's last year in office, right? So that was a moment at which you saw them using processes, political processes, to change the composition of the court. Very, very briefly after, Amy Coney Barrett replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now the voting has already started in the next election, right? By their pretextual analysis, you can't possibly seat Justice Barrett before the 2020 election, but boom, she's on the court. Again, abusing the processes, the legal processes to affect the confirmation. And then I think the arc sort of continues, you know, the reversal of Roe v. Wade with very, very bad originalism. And then, you know, I think we get to a year ago right now when the court signs off on this presidential immunity decision that's plucked from nowhere. There's no history in the Constitution. There's no provision that says that the president is immune from criminal prosecution. Boom, by a 6-3 conservative supermajority, it ends. And that opens the door for not just Trump not to be prosecuted, but for the election. And that's really continued into this term. In many ways, this past term we just finished has been the most partisan, political, if Trump wants it, he gets it, with a little bit of like, you know, bargaining in the middle from the center of the court. But I think that the notion that the court is this mystical, perfect bestower of judgment is now completely gone, and we see that in the polling numbers. But I also think, and this is probably where I would just end this thought, that they were really good at hiding it before, the 9 justices. And what we have really seen, and what is deeply damaging to the integrity of the judicial branch, is that it's now flagrant, it's partisan, the dissents are ugly, the attacks on one another are ugly. It's as though the justices themselves have given up the illusion that they're oracles in robes. They're just partisan, sort of, white knuckle fighters.